So on that note, we're going to be shifting the discussion a bit to talking about how do you advance that community resilience discussion and some lessons learned. And we're really excited about the panelists that we put together for this because they represent such an interesting array of viewpoints to help this discussion. And thank you all for being willing to serve on this panel. I'm going to introduce all of you all together, and then we're going to start with Susan. Susan, we're going to start off with Susan Cockrell, who's the town manager for the town of Kilmarnock. And she was the voice of pragmatism throughout this effort. When we would talk about various resilience initiatives, she'd say, you know, we really need to work with the county on that. That's really something that has to be a joint effort with the county or with the state. So we've asked her to share some of her wisdom about that this morning. And then we'll hear from Pat Frere, the town manager for the town of Whitestone. Although Pat is like the staff for a small town, they've got this new sewer system and this business district revitalization going on. So he has some important lessons to share about how to move resilience forward in a small town with little capacity on staff. And then Mason Brent, who's a community leader and a farm owner in Northumberland County. And he can give us that business and agricultural perspective, the reasons why he got involved with the RAFT implementation team, and his firsthand experience and changes he might have seen in flooding impacts from an agricultural perspective. For Lancaster County, Ann Self with the Friends of the Rappahannock, she's the Lower Rappahannock River Steward. She's going to be sharing with us a viewpoint from a nonprofit of how she's partnering with the county to assist with some of the green and blue infrastructure projects to help impact resilience. And then we'll finish up with Darrin Lee, who's the planner for Westmoreland County, and he can talk about the GIS and data needs for resilience planning. You know, we just heard from Colonial Beach, Robin mentioning how that's important in what they're doing. I do want to note that one thing we've learned, and you all, I'm sure, are learning from this day, if you didn't already know, is that every locality is very different. And so, for example, Richmond County saying that they found the social vulnerability worksheet to be so helpful. You know, a smaller town may not find that as helpful because it's small enough, you know, where a lot of these communities are. So everyone brings a different perspective to the table. Great, and we'll start off with Pat. Pat, could you kick us off then?
All right. For those that are not familiar with Whitestone, we are a small town. We have about 350 people, probably 60 to 70 businesses, and likewise, we have a small staff, as Elizabeth was alluding to. We have a part-time town manager, a part-time town clerk, part-time police chief, and a part-time officer, and a part-time maintenance man. So I just start off by saying, as such, you know, we were very thankful for the outside resources and expertise that were provided by the RAFT team. Before beginning the RAFT process, we were plugging away on implementing a number of long-term projects that Elizabeth had referred to. We had a housing block grant. We're in the middle of a phase 1 public sewage project. The town's never had public sewage. It's always been 100% dependent on septic systems. We've been more reacting to addressing town-wide stormwater issues as each one moves up on the priority list. And we've also been pursuing a long-term business district revitalization project. So when we initially began the RAFT process, there were 4 to 5 needs or concerns that became really apparent. The first was, we are a small town. There was a lack of communication tools with both the town government and the business association. Neither one had a website. There was gaps in emergency communication. We found that there was a need to develop or improve long-term business support, and we also needed to improve the town's infrastructure with priorities on the sewer and stormwater. So the RAFT team has helped us, and that we recognized that a lot of these needs were being addressed through long-term efforts that were being carried out by the town. So the RAFT team narrowed our action items down with the goal of looking at ones or action items that could build and give direction to our current efforts, which were became our action checklist items. So all these things are being addressed in a slower, long-term way. So we're trying to figure out how can we advance these with this process. And as such, you could see that the action checklist reflects the things I described. So the first one was developing a strategy for emergency communication, and we made substantial progress on that. And I'm going to describe that one further in a minute. Second was developing a website for the town. Again, much progress was made with the help of the RAFT team. We've nailed down 10 possible domain names. We've, with the students and the team's help, outlined or designed a website. The next steps are to develop the website content and links, and we also are planning to use funds from the Business District Revitalization Project, which was awarded to the town in a block grant to assist with the website development. The business sector, planning and resilience, again, much progress was made. We had UVA student teams that came and helped with plans for an expanded downtown park that hopefully in the next year will be implemented in our downtown revitalization project. We had William and Mary student teams that presented ideas for urban stormwater improvements. They also helped with the website design, and again, we're planning to advance that work even further with this project. The stormwater improvements, we made less progress, but some. But that will be an ongoing action item that we'll look for help for in the fall of this year and next year, as well as drafting the model business or zoning ordinance. Less progress was made, but as some of these other projects are being finished, we have a goal of shifting towards the zoning ordinance. Through all of that, you can see with the first three items, we made substantial progress on one, much progress on two others. But we did have one success story that we wanted to share, and that's on the town-wide emergency communication strategy. So one of the town's checklist items was to develop a strategy for enhanced emergency communication. This item arose right when we were really beginning our RAFT team's monthly meeting. A tornado had struck near the town, resulting in damage to a number of residences right outside the town. And the team, in doing its needs assessment, realized that we have a significant elderly population that still relies on landlines for telephones, while also having less access to both smartphones and the internet. So the RAFT team believed that the town needed a practical, feasible, realistic way to implement a strategy for bettering emergency communication. A lot of people didn't know the storm had hit until after it had already been by the town, and then the fire siren went off and people's phones beeped. So we're trying to figure out how to better that type of emergency communication. So the team's idea was to hold a town-wide event, and they explored NOAA weather emergency alert radios with battery backups that could be distributed to the town's residents and households, with the goal of that being a way to lure them there for their free radio. And while they're there, also signing them up for the county's Code Red emergency alert system. So come away with two improved methods of communicating for enhancing emergency communications through one event. So with Elizabeth's guidance and Lincoln Boykin with the River County's Community Foundation, the town and the RAFT team applied for a grant from the River County's Community Foundation to purchase 175 weather radios, batteries, and money to market and advertise the planned event. And the application was funded, and we're planning to have that event sometime in the fall of this year. So again, I just want to say that the town is just thankful for the outside expertise and resources that y'all provided. It's something that isn't readily available, and it gave us a chance to kind of pause, reflect, and move our project forward an extra step when we weren't expecting it. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And just to follow up on what he said, it was interesting because Pat had this great idea. Why don't we do the weather radios? Such a large proportion of our population is elderly. When I called VDEM to talk about, is there any funding available, they noted federal dollars. It has to go through a cost benefit analysis, and weather radios will never pass that. And so Lincoln was, with the River Counties Community Foundation, was already a part of the RAFT process. So I was able to contact him, and he was great about being open to talking about it. But it reiterated the importance of these community connections, of having the whole community at the table to talk about resilience and the various skills and opportunities that people bring. So as you're considering the formation of a resilience committee to continue the effort in your locality, that's an important part of it to remember. Pat, with such an extensive, huge staff that you have, how did you go about prioritizing actions to pursue and what to focus on?
That is a good question. I think one of the things we were able to do was to meld the RAFT action items with the long-term projects that were already underway. So I think that helped prioritize or provide direction to our action items. And we, the town, I think, we're thankful and took advantage of having, and I can't underestimate how much help this was. I don't want to say free consulting work, but for example, the UVA student plan for our expanded park, I've seen work provided by consultants, and theirs was right up there, if not better than what we've gotten from some consultants. So one, it helped in melding these with our long-term efforts, helped provide that direction. But then two, not having the resources and having them there, that helped us jump on taking advantage of the students to help.
Pat, one last question. How are you thinking about resilience as you're approaching your stormwater issues, your sewer plans, the business district revitalization? Is there a particular way that you're looking to incorporate resilience into those plans?
I think one thing we've realized, and hopefully this will get built on in the second year, and working with John at the Planning District Commission, is the need for a long-term town-wide stormwater improvement plan, looking at the whole town, and then being able to prioritize the 4 or 5 key improvements that need to be made at the different watersheds or drainage ways, and then just one at a time pursuing the funding to carry out those projects and knocking out our list. So that would be one way. The other would be that we also, once all of these other projects are finished in the next year or two, are probably going to start the process of updating our comprehensive plan. So like we've heard earlier in the other localities in the counties, incorporating more long-term resiliency type items in our comprehensive plan, which, they aren't.
Thank you, Pat. That was very helpful. Susan is up next. She's joined us. And Susan, I noted in the introduction that you were so pragmatic throughout this process and great about pointing out this is something we need to work with the county on to achieve it. This is something that needs the coordination with the state. So we thought you could bring some of that wisdom to us this morning.
I thought it might be helpful to just talk a little bit about learnings. They're probably really learnings for me, and maybe others haven't had them, but I think it's just real important to kind of acknowledge the process and what bringing this kind of topic of RAFT and resilience kind of is going to mean to Kilmarnock. I think the first thing that was really imperative to me was the aspect that resilience is really not just mitigating the hazard. And I thought the process really lent itself to a holistic view. And particularly by that, I mean, not only the planning for prevention, but also the planning for mitigation and the ability for the for the total locality, not just us at a town level, but to interact at the county level, particularly where there are responsibilities that are outside of our normal scope. Where we are a support system, but we're not the driving entity, if you will. And that particularly for Kilmarnock, because we don't, by the traditional definitions, we typically don't have, we're not in a low-lying area, we're not at waterfront property, but because we have the hospital here and we have rescue squad and we have essentially the EOC when it goes into, when it kicks into need, we provide some continuity and some infrastructure that the whole system can use kind of once the crisis is upon us, so to speak. And so I thought that for me was really important to acknowledge that the process brings that to the forefront. And I am very pragmatic about it. I'll talk about some meat and potatoes stuff here in just a minute, but that was like the first thing. Resilience is a whole lot more than anticipating a problem in the most traditional sense. So I thought that was really helpful to us. The second thing I have is that education is really critical. And that's everyone from the elected bodies to the governance side to the general public. We are still working through the learning curve with elected officials. It's something that is just not, resilience is not in their lexicon, and what it means and what it could mean from a policy point of view is still an ongoing discussion. It's very easy I shouldn't say it's very easy. You can, as an elected official, sometimes really get caught up in some of the day-to-day immediate needs of the constituency. And resilience really points, in my view, to long-term planning and long-term mobilization. And so I think educating is critical, and finally getting to the general public about why we should care about this topic and how it's going to manifest itself. So that was my second takeaway. Cooperation and teamwork is really the third thing. I don't believe in doing somebody else's work if I'm not responsible to do it. But I say that in the spirit of teamwork, because with our county, we don't want to step on the toes of an entity that is charged with doing work, but we certainly want to be the support system when it comes to policy development and execution. So if something, as an example, is really the responsibility in response of emergency management, and that is led at the county level, then we don't want to be setting up anything that mitigates that or conflicts with that or doesn't support that at a kind of 200% level. So that, I think, was a critical piece as well. And that really lends itself rather to getting our policy side of the house in order. So engaging our planning commission. I agree with where, and just concur with where Pat is on comprehensive plan, making sure that your zoning, your stormwater management plans support this, and then being able to make sure that the things that we put in place today are going to support resilience and the whole planning process to kind of avoid a crisis in the future. And then lastly, just in thanking the RAFT team for bringing all this to the forefront. For me, it was a huge learning opportunity that I really appreciated. But it really is going to help us in what I call taking care of the meat and potatoes items. We have stormwater management issues in our downtown area. They are naturally occurring. They are probably enhanced or made worse by construction work that we did in the early 2000s. And then as we start to see events like we've had in this past summer, where we have a 9-inch rain in the course of, a couple of hours. It was not unusual to see stormwater up over the curbs in Kilmarnock. And as a result, we've got some really unhappy businesses and some really concerned citizens about what in the heck the town's going to do to take care of a once in 100-year rain event. So those are legitimate concerns. So John Bateman has been so gracious to offer his assistance, because as we like to say, if these were easy fixes, they'd have been done by now. So they're complicated. They involve many, many parties. It's everything from the local government to business owners to property owners to VDOT, who have a say in the solution. And trying to keep people out of their silos is a real important part of this process, and I think moving the whole resilience piece forward. So we're looking forward to introducing John to stormwater in Steptoe's district and getting some additional thoughts about trying to fix some really complicated problems. So that's really what's in our next step. We're going to go right at stormwater issues in town. We've already done some amazing work that Marshall Sebra led several years ago. That really helps with runoff off of Route 3. But the issues before us all have to do with our downtown area, and how do we help ourselves, if you will, not only rain, but just excessive rainfall, stormwater, et cetera. Those are all problems that, frankly, aren't going to go away. And they are, like I said, if they were easy fixes, they'd have been done by now, but I think we have some more tools at our disposal in terms of what to do.
You started off making that important point that you all may not have tidal waterfront, but you have the hospital. You have, let's face it, you have the Walmart, and you have that intersection, that major intersection.
Right.
And so fixing those stormwater issues in the downtown is not only vital for your businesses and the residents who shop there, but also for that, right? So you have that extra kind of burden of fun of trying to clean up this main intersection of water so that people can get through in an emergency. So that viewpoint that you brought of always saying, connecting those dots and saying, okay, this also needs to have the county at the table or the state at the table, it's really key. John pointed out in the chat box that this really takes a whole of government approach. Mm-hmm. So we're hoping later on, as John noted, we're going to talk a little bit about funding sources, and maybe this new community flood preparedness fund at the state level can assist with some of those stormwater issues. That would be great. It does take the whole of government and the whole of community. That's right. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts you wanted to share about good ways to achieve that whole of government approach, or as we just noted, whole of community is a good way to put it. And thoughts about that, incorporating that into the resilience planning going forward.
Yeah, I think the way forward is you've got all of these things have to have a champion, and I think between for us, and I would include us as Pat as well, and Irvington as the incorporated towns, I think it's determining with Lancaster County government where those champions need to reside, and so we have, and with the PDC as well, because I think the PDC has a really great overarching view, and it's really a matter of, in my view, kind of setting up who are those champions, trying not to bite off too much, trying not to fix world hunger, but to find those things that are critical and that you can get, frankly, an easy win on. You need an upfront win. Pat's got it with this great idea of the radios. I mean, that's the perfect example of find an easy win. It helps engagement. It shows people that you're serious, and move on from there. And that's something that I think is easily done in cooperation with the county level. We all have good relationships there at a local government piece, and it's just, frankly, it's finding that thing that we all have in common. And whether it's stormwater or whether it's the emergency management angle of it, that's not, the community comes together in a crisis. And so I think as we look at this as, let's not just react, but let's be proactive in anticipation of a crisis, These are, I think, easy things to rally around. We just got to make sure we're not rallying around, solving world hunger, world peace, etc. To me, let's make it tactical, so that we're making a difference, and we can do that right away in the community.
So maybe a resilience committee that's Lancaster County reps, but also Kilmarnock, Whitestone, Irvington, maybe that could
I think
be
there's an umbrella structure that comes at the county level because of the amount of resources and responsibilities they have at their disposal, and that each of the smaller localities can really say, okay, what's my role to support this overarching countywide need? My downtown Steptoes water problem is not necessarily a countywide problem, although we'll feel it if nobody can get to Walmart. But there are some overarching things like, what do we do about the lowest level of landmass that we have, and what is the risk to those communities, and how do we pull that off?
Thank you, Susan. All right, we're gonna keep moving, and next we'll hear from Mason Brent, and he's from Northumberland County, as I noted earlier, and we are looking forward to your perspective, Mason, as both a business leader and an agricultural representative, community representative.
Thanks, Elizabeth. One thing I'd like to get clear up front is I have no official capacity with Northumberland County. You asked two questions, the first of which, what did I find of interest with the whole RAFT initiative, and would like to be involved in it. All of these initiatives and mitigation plans have one thing in common, I think, and that is they all require funding. I'm here on behalf of the River Counties Community Foundation, of which I'm a member of the board. And the interesting item to me is how we can explore a more formalized, a more coordinated fund sourcing through both political, public, and private sources. I don't see any coordination. It's certainly not in Northumberland County or cooperation. And I think it is worth pursuing some sort of a formal coalition or committee or whatever you want to call it, to get together to say, okay, who can bring what to the table and where is the need? That's why I'm kind of sticking around and want to do whatever I can to help along that line. Secondly, you mentioned that I live on a farm and have some agricultural interests. My concern there is what Susan alluded to. We obviously have along the coastline, we have coastal erosion due to storms, all kinds of stuff, tidal movements, etc. What is new to me, and I've been in this area on and off for 50 some years, in the last 2 or 3 years, I have seen the most torrential rains that I have ever seen in my life. To the point that I'm now not just concerned about our coastal erosions, but I'm concerned about our internal erosions. See that in our agricultural fields. I see bridge washouts, so forth and so on. We, Northumberland County, as you know, are predominantly an agricultural county. We raise a lot of crops for animal feed, for human consumption, and so on. And when you look at the demand for that throughout our country, with a population today of a little over 330 million people and a projected population of 379 million people by the year 2050, or a 14% increase in the mouths we've got to feed, losing farmland is not good. And to the best of my knowledge, there's no practical way to create new cropland to keep up with the mallets we have to feed. So I have talked to several farmers in this area that have made the same observations as I. A couple of them have tried putting in berms to divert stormwater around their field and into the woods, only to find that torrential stream is washing out the root balls of trees, and trees are falling. So obviously we have no answer as of today as to how to control this kind of internal erosion. And I think it is a problem that needs to be addressed. And it's going to take planning, and it's going to take mitigation protocols and so forth and so on. Today, I just don't know what they are. I would like to see that become a part of RAFT's concerns. And I would certainly be willing to do anything I can to help along that line. That's my perspective, Elizabeth.
Great. Thank you. That was helpful to hear from someone, I'll say down in the trenches or down in the overflowing ditches. We appreciate that. So from your perspective as a resident, a businessman, a farmer, what do you think resilience looks like for the community in a big sense? Whether it's comprehensive plan, resilience committee, et cetera.
Having been in business, for most of my life, 40 some years or so, in the business world, resilience and adaptation, so forth and so on, are part of your everyday job. That company has to do that every single day. They have to keep up with their competition, which is obviously their number one threat. They have to keep up with regulation, which is another threat. Costs, you have to keep up with OpEx and so forth and so on. All of those require resiliency and adaptation to the marketplace. So it's certainly no new concept there. It is a new concept to me when you step into this world, the world of local government involvement in protecting our environment, the area we live in, both ecologically and economically wise. But I think it's a great process, and it's, to me, it's not a cyclical process. It's an ongoing, every single day process.
Well, and I know that the Northumberland Economic Development Office is involved, and that they're considering resilience in those efforts as well, which I thought was a great thing when they when we talked about that at the implementation team meeting. So I think that'll be a big help on that front as well. Thank you. Okay, so next we're going to move on to hear from Ann Self, talking about the role of conservation and restoration of natural resources and your partnership with Lancaster to increase green and blue infrastructure.
Thank you so much for having me. So many people have already made such a good point about how this is so complex, and there are so many pieces to this puzzle. And so FOR really, we tried to kind of take this environmental piece of it and be able to carry that part of the load for all of this. And I'm here a little bit to talk about Lancaster County, but I work throughout the Northern Neck and even down into the Middle Peninsula. So if anything I say today resonates with anyone on this call, please absolutely reach out to me. And we have found, as has also been mentioned, that funding is one of the big hurdles for a lot of this. And so with Lancaster County, with the independent towns within Lancaster County, we've really just tried to be a good partner in being able to take a little bit of that responsibility for making sure we're helping with stormwater using green infrastructure. We've done a lot of tree giveaways to the local residents so that they can also have ownership over this process, which is so important because, especially with Friends of the Rappahannock, we're a nonprofit who works widely throughout the region. And I feel like so often people come in and just want to do what they think is best. And this RAFT process has been so beneficial to really hear what the localities as well as the citizens want. Because I can think something will work perfectly from my perspective, but I don't work in county government, I don't work in local government. And so just being able to directly connect with people at different levels and different stages of this process has been so beneficial to driving where our work goes. And so with Lancaster County specifically, like I said, tree giveaways have been a big portion of what we've done here. And we are working currently with John Bateman and with others we helped apply for that NIFWIF technical assistance grant. We were one of the partners in that to really help all of the counties throughout the Northern Neck get the ability to prioritize different areas for green infrastructure. And I haven't heard if we've gotten that grant yet. I don't think the answers have come out, but fingers crossed that'll really be a big step towards meeting a lot of these goals. And it'll really let the counties drive where they want to go with all of this green and blue infrastructure. So like I said, we've done tree giveaways. We help apply for funding. We can help actually do community tree plantings days. We've worked with the refuge system. So this has been just such a great way to connect with the community and really get these projects moving.
Great, thanks. And I specifically, like when the forestry grant announcement came out, that it was terrific because when we were talking about the lack of capacity at the county staff level to really take on these grant applications, you stepped up and said, hey, we can help out with that. Let us take a look at it. So one quick question is, I think a lot of folks think of nonprofits as a big help in community education about the importance of natural and nature-based features, et cetera. But can you also play a role in a not just an implementation team meeting, but a more permanent resilience committee in a locality in bringing back citizen input to the local government to help them in that regard too, to hear about concerns in the community about resilience?
So our goal is to be ingrained in the community and really be a voice for the river, but also recognize that balance between human needs and environmental needs. So I'm happy to speak. We as an organization are happy to speak, and we work on many committees with the focus on resilience. We're part of the Virginia Coastal Master Resiliency Plan meetings that are happening throughout the localities. And so, yeah, that's a big part of what we want to do, working with both the localities and speaking from a citizen, because we're a membership-based organization. We do all of our work for our members and for the people who live in our localities. This isn't just, planting trees for the sake of it. This is planting trees to make sure that your bank isn't eroding, that you're not experiencing erosion, your yard's not flooding, because we really do see it from both sides. And
so what do you think are some of the big challenges for resilience with green and blue infrastructure right now? You mentioned, shoreline erosion. That's a big one that impacts a lot of property owners. Are there other things that you see are really needed? Tree plantings, water quality, whatever it is that maybe that we could combine with resilience efforts?
Yeah, I mean, it's all interconnected. Every time you plant a tree, you're increasing water quality. Every time you throw some oyster shell out, you're increasing water quality and helping with erosion along shorelines. So the kind of three main areas that we're working in right now are oyster restoration, so getting out and increasing our oyster populations because we love to eat them. And they're also such great water filters, and they really do help with a lot of this coastal flooding. There's actually a really cool article in the New Yorker recently about how oyster reefs actually positively impact coastal flooding. They help decrease that wave energy and absorb some of that and just kind of mitigate those flooding events a little bit. We do a lot of shoreline work. So I just recently completed 400 linear feet of shoreline in Urbana, which I know isn't part of this, but that's one of our areas. And I have a number of site visits coming up for places throughout Lancaster and the other counties, and then tree plantings, because trees are our greatest buffers. So, because when we talk about the watershed and when we talk about the Rappahannock River, so many people just think of it from like an aquatic perspective, like out on the water, but a watershed really is the land and the water combined. And so making sure we're taking care of both of those, because the Northern Neck, I mean, I grew up here, and this is just such a beautiful place that has that perfect balance of green space and nature, and being able to also serve our human populations. And so being able to create that balance and protect both is so important.
So for our localities in attendance in the Rappahannock watershed, keep in mind that Friends of the Rappahannock may be able to assist in connecting you with some of these grant opportunities. Thank you, Sierra. She just posted the article from the New Yorker, I think, that Ann just mentioned. And thank you, Ann, for your time. John, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to add that the Friends of the Rappahannock is critical to all of our efforts, all of our regional and local efforts. So we're really grateful and thankful to have a group like that based here in the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula to provide those services, especially the education outreach to our youth about watershed education. That's really critical to our identity here in the Northern Neck.
Yeah, and really to anyone on this call, if you have a green infrastructure project or something that you think might be a green infrastructure project, or stormwater, any of these things that you're mentioning, the expansion of the park in Whitestone, please feel free to reach out to me. John very kindly put my information in the chat box over there, and I'm happy to share it again. Like, even if it's something that we can't directly help with, we can connect you to resources for funding or volunteer manpower or kind of anything you want to do, we're willing to help with.
All right, so thank you. Next, we're going to hear, bringing us home, Darrin Lee, planner with Westmoreland County, talking about various GIS data needs for resilience planning. Thanks, Darrin.
I'm Darrin Lee from Westmoreland County. I'm a land use planner here, and I was just going to talk about some of the things from our GIS toolbox. I use this GIS toolbox for planning and permitting purposes. As far as resiliency is concerned, you know, from the land use side, we look at some of the long-term things that we can do to address resiliency issues. You know, as you know, there's two parts. You know, when a natural event is happening, there's like immediate response, and then from the land use perspective, you know, we look at what we can do from the planning side when we're permitting things. So we have quite a few items in our toolbox, but I was just going to highlight about 3 or 4 of those things. I also do like wetlands cases. So one of the layers that I use in planning and permitting is tracking all of my wetland cases and permits. And in the long term, one of the things you can do with that layer is, you know, understanding how those type of devices are, you know, responding to storms and as they become more frequent over time. One of the things that we're considering, you know, with our wetlands cases is, you know, thinking about the life of a project, whether or not this is designed to last, you know, 30 or 40 or 50 years. And also, it's not really like a new concept, but it's something that's being more emphasized now with the living shorelines. And so by tracking those and showing how those are geographically dispersed along the coastline can be like an educational piece for people. One of the things I wanted to do in the future is try to incorporate some story maps and things like that to show, you know, how effective these things are. And so being able to highlight those and show that to other property owners who might be considering those type of shoreline erosion protection, you know, that could help in that effort. Also, I track like when someone has like dead or dying trees, you know, those require maintenance within the RPA. And so I do, you know, track tree removal and replacement within the RPA buffer. So I think that's something interesting that can be tracked over time as far as reducing flood risk and decreasing carbon levels. Stormwater BMPs is another thing that's in the GIS toolbox that we use for all of our cases and projects. So whenever we're doing like a Chesapeake Bay Act exception, stormwater BMPs are required for those property owners. So being able to track those, you know, over time is another thing that can be used. We also have a stream layer that we use. There's a couple ways that I use this layer. Of course, all of the streams in the county don't necessarily show up on maps or don't show up on quad mosaics. And so a lot of that is field work. And when we go out into the field and we find something that's not on the maps, we update our stream layers. I've also seen patterns in between, like when we're looking at things like road closures and stuff like that. There seems to be patterns between showing between where these streams are and when the roads get flooded. So that helps to understand when you're planning facilities or critical infrastructure, making sure that those are located in areas that wouldn't be, affected by that, and also helping to better identify those vulnerable areas, since we do have a lot of coastline in our county. There would be certain areas that are impacted by road closures due to flooding. Also, like the last layer that I was going to discuss is trying to incorporate like building footprints. Whenever we have new construction, I do footprints for those. And so trying to maybe put some different attributes in there from some of the building code standards is also another part of that equation. So that's some of the items that we have in our GIS toolbox that we use during the permitting process. A couple other things as far as how we run everything for GIS. We're one of the biggest counties in the Northern Neck. According to the new census data that came out, we experienced, I believe it was around 5% growth. So we did increase, and so we kind of also, if you look at other counties that are north of us, I would like to advocate for localities having specific GIS departments to be able to manage that GIS data. That's a model that you can see in places like King George or Caroline. And so that's one thing I also wanted to put into this discussion. Also, just the need for like a data sharing platform, because I was mentioning like road closures. I don't think that's something that's really tracked, and so it would be good if any other organizations have that data. You could put it on a platform where everyone could get to it. Another thing that I was talking about that some other organizations already do when you're looking at like shoreline work, VIMS is very good at looking at those type of things. They already have maps and certain things online showing those things. So I think like a data sharing platform would be good. And also using like crowdsourcing would be another thing that I would advocate for, because you can't be everywhere all at once. And so sometimes when people are in their own environments, they can get information to you quicker by using crowdsourcing tools.
Well, thank you, Darrin. Actually, I think you've answered a question I was about to ask you, which is, do data gaps or limitations hinder your efforts at resilience and adaptation planning at the local level? You noted the need for maybe a joint platform for data. I think you mentioned adaptva.com, which is a VIMS platform essentially for NOAA sea level rise data and social vulnerability data. And you can go in and look at a parcel level at the predicted flooding, toggling out how many years out you want to go and how much risk tolerance you have, looking at determining which NOAA curve you want to look at. So I would suggest that is a helpful tool. Maybe that could be a source of data sharing. Happy to help facilitate a discussion if you like with VIMS folks who do adapt VA to see if that could happen. I didn't know if you had any other thoughts as well about that. The crowdsourcing I wanted to mention to you, Dr. Derek Loftus at VIMS does that with flooding levels. In flooding events, he goes out there to double check and to ground proof his modeling, but he also does the Catch the King event when they're king tides to get the crowd to give him data on how high the waters rose. So it's a similar concept, and I wonder if it could be expanded into other areas. If you're interested, I can connect you to him. So did you have any other thoughts about platforms that might be helpful that could be used, or just kind of the need is there?
I think it's really just kind of, you know, connecting with all the other different counties and getting everybody on the same page. Of course, there's already platforms and things that exist. I know years ago, VDM did like a mobile app that they did. But I mean, you know, there are GIS platforms that are out there, so it's just a fact of getting everybody on the same, you know, on the same page so that we can share amongst each other.
So one last question: what, in your view, helped you to get the most out of the RAFT process, or what are some levers or prompts or incentives that you all use that you want to continue to use to move forward the resilience discussion? I'd like to open it up for questions in general from folks, and I do want to ask John if you had any additional comments or questions as well.
I mean, I could probably provide some input on what Darrin's talking about and its relation to the RAFT. Again, the RAFT team put together a data list because we identified early on in it the very same needs that Darrin just mentioned, which is you can't appropriately plan for adapting and resilience without proper data. You know, I think we've all learned from large tech corporations just how important data is in assessing things, and I think local governments are slowly picking up on that and understanding that they need data for proper planning. One thing the Planning District Commission has done over the years through its technical assistance to the Coastal Zone Management Program is provide GIS support and capability building. And that's something over the years that each local government has addressed. They almost all have a dedicated staff person that does their data and GIS. And that's something that I promote along with Darrin, that they should have a very dedicated department and staff. We've also been slowly working towards creating a regional data sharing platform, a regional clearinghouse for data, if you will, that would include federal and state data, but also locality data, so that those types of planning can move forward without having to request information from our local government and state government partners. And then crowdsourcing is a really good way to get data. And Elizabeth, you mentioned the Catch the King Tide that Wetlands Watch does. And that's something that we've been working with Wetlands Watch to bring to the Northern Neck. Whenever we have a sunny day flooding event or even a storm event, you can go on Facebook here in the Northern Neck and you can see all the pictures of people's docks underwater and water in people's houses. If we can capture that data based on a location platform, that data can then be used to determine what those impacts are going forward. So I think crowdsourcing that data is a very good way to go.
We had some incredible state agency partners throughout this process. Anybody from VDH, David Fridley, to Aaron Wendt with DCRC's, the Shoreline Erosion Advisory Service, Lowry Becker with the Stormwater Conservation District. I mean, we had DOF, bunch of folks. I see Brian Bays is with us today. You know, I think that that state support says volumes about their willingness to work with localities in the region, and we really appreciated those key partners and want to thank you for your efforts too.
Wanted to recognize another critical component to the RAFT, which is our local citizenry. People like Mason attending these meetings taking their time out of their day. They're very involved in their community. They have a lot of input and expertise and experiences that could be shared with local governments, and they should continue to be engaged by local governments. They're obviously engaged in their community like Mason is, but they need to be engaged by local government when we're going through these planning process to truly understand what the impacts are to residents on the ground. So I want to thank those residents that took the time this last year to participate. Thank you.